Good afternoon. I am Milton Kimpson, and it is my great pleasure to be able to conduct an interview of my father, Milton Kimpson, talking a little bit about how important the Omega Psi Phi fraternity has been to both of us and to other members of our family. And I'm going to jump right on in and ask my dad some questions, and I look forward to his answers because I'm certain that I will learn some things today. Daddy.
Yeah.
What was the first time you noticed the Omega Psi Phi fraternity? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, my freshman year, I learned when I was in high school, when you go to an organization, etc., that you should know the people who are important. And you're going to college, you need to know the persons who are scholars. So that if you were having difficulties, etc., there would be somebody that's there to answer your questions. Or my father used to tell me that get with the people who are the good students, and they will think you're the good student too. So that's what I was seeking for, and I looked for organizations. I came from a low state, low part of the state, but there was a kind of feeling for people who wanted to go further and get a degree, and that's what I did. At Benedict, I saw people who were important. It used to be the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, and Omega was one of the organizations that I was impressed with, and I wanted to meet the officers, the members, and that's, I guess, I came about that.
So, Daddy, you're at Benedict College.
Yeah.
Do you remember which year you pledged?
1950, I think it was.
I think that's about right. Either you may have begun in 1950, but I think you went over in 1951.
Yeah,
And the reason I know that is because remember we all were at the centennial celebration in 2011, and you got your 60-year pin that year.
Yeah.
Now, Daddy, when you began pledging in 1950 to go over in 1951, who were some of the more influential Omegas on Benedict's campus at the time?
Albert Reed, who was a pre-med student, Clarence Vaughn, who was a medical assistant. Then you had people who are in the sciences. There were people like Dr. as I see, he's not Albert Reed, Clarence Vaughn, and they both men in the medical. The other gentlemen who were in the organization pursuing science classes.
And Daddy, you've told us a little bit about some of the Omega's own campus. Talked about Dr. Reed, Dr. Albert Reed, Dr. Vaughn. During that time in the 50s, did you ever have an opportunity to meet other Omega Psi Phi men on the national scene? I believe, didn't you tell me you'd met Dr. Benjamin E. Mays?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Were there other national Omega men that you may have gotten a chance to meet?
I don't recall knowing anything about Martin Luther King, but Dr. Benjamin Mays was, I can't remember, but Dr. Mays was our idol. We talked about him a lot. He was a scholar, see, and we tried to get with the scholars. When you majored in mathematics, pre-medical, English, and you had to work. We had a Dr. Jones at Benedict, and boy, he knew so many things. And if you go and sit in on his classes, sometimes you didn't have to be a member of the class because you had to have a certain score.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you had to be looked at as honor society or close to honor society. And as I said, I met Dr. Reed. He wasn't Dr. Reed, Albert Reed, but also there was a young lady there, Angie Forrest, I believe her name was, and I had to do a lot of studying, majoring in mathematics. So Albert Reed and Ann Forrest, and on the weekends we'd study. And Albert I didn't have a car, but Albert had a Reed. I had a car. It wasn't much good, but we'd get in the car and get a sandwich and something like that. And man, they went to schools that had more subjects in. So what happened is, on Sunday afternoon, we'd go to where Albert boarded or Annie, where Annie lived. And they would talk all this, and they had such good vocabulary, boy. But I was some boy. Everybody thought I was smart. Well, I didn't fail. But I majored in mathematics, and you couldn't play around. And so you took Benedict College, Benedict College, and Allen University. These schools linked together because they were poor schools, so you might do for instance, if you're in the sciences, if you're in the English and this kind of thing, you might have some professors from there. See, Benedict a PhD couldn't quite perform, all those high levels of PhDs, so. And Benedict had all the sciences, mathematics, medicine, and so forth. And as a result, then for your social studies and stuff, you used the persons from Allen University, and that's where you got a PhD, and you got you got someone from Allen University, the social studies, etc.
Daddy, I want to, we want to leave kind of a legacy for younger brothers of Omegapsiphi. So let me ask you this. What impact do you believe being a member of Omegapsiphi has had on your life?
Well, I learned that Benedict, you looked for persons who were active, persons who belonged to the organization, and especially persons who control around there, not faculty, but the Qs always wanted they gonna head all of the organizations on the campus. President of the class, head football player, all of that were, and really, I got to know people based on what they majored in, and because these people were head of the, as I said, the organizations on the campus, and you get with them, and I wasn't that smart, I don't think, but when you associate with persons who are active, didn't play all the time, always, we would have growth studies among us, sitting in the school on the campus at night, because I didn't live on a campus, But we sit to meet these persons, like I mentioned, Clarence Vaughn, he's a doctor. Clarence was exceptional. Albert Reeves was exceptional. And I can go and go on, but I probably can't remember the names. But if you, my daddy taught me that if you associate with the best groups, if you associate with the best studies, well, you're going to be fairly smart, or if you're not that smart, people will think you're smart.
Let me ask you this question for a second, because I'm curious, and we want to tell the brothers, give them an idea. You're graduating from Benedict. This is the early 50s. What was the political climate like then?
The only thing you knew back in our early 50s, you talked about the NAACP. You know, we couldn't vote. You didn't never see any black policemen. You thought at that time that I'm going to prepare myself, and I'm going to prepare myself for one day when my chance comes. And that is interesting things we learn. You don't act as though you're not going to be anybody. You're not going to have any good jobs. You're not going to be a doctor. You act as you're going to do that. So when you do that, then you really became that. Now, there were no black state officers and stuff. You didn't see any black policemen or anything, but you thought about it like you would become. There's this thing I shall study and prepare myself for one day when my chance comes. I shall be ready. Not and my professor, Dr. Benjamin, he would say, well, your chances come, but if you don't study, prepare yourself when your chance comes, and then not if my chance comes, when my chances come. And that was one of the things that caused me to go on, and you know my career. I've had a good career, and I went outside of the state. Most people, because that was the only place you could go, would be South Carolina State for a master's degree. And I met a friend of mine, and he told me about the University of Wisconsin. And I went and I got my graduate degree from that. I also was successful in that I don't have an earned doctorate, but I have 2 honorary. One from Benedict College, a doctor of social services, and another one from Wofford College. Well, Wofford College is one of the highest colleges, good for academics. And you know, you went to Wofford College, and they awarded me with a doctor of, it's there behind you. So right behind you there, look at the college of Benedict, and they gave me a doctor's degree. And Benedict, the same thing. Indeed, Benedict was one of the best black colleges in South Carolina. And then University of Wisconsin, where I got my master's, it gave me an honorary doctor's degree also.
Daddy, what, as the fraternity gets older, we have newer brothers come in who have many more career choices, have many more opportunities that even you all had when you were coming through. What overall message would you give to the brothers of Omegapsiphi? From your vantage point of being in the fraternity now, almost, you're going on 69 years and being 90 years yourself. What message would you give to the brothers of Omegapsiphi?
Well, you ought to become active in the running of this country and of this world. We, as you just happened yesterday, we got now a black elected a black woman as the Vice President of the United States. We have lawyers. We have people on every level of government now. And we got Jim Cliven, who is a highly respected person from the state of South Carolina. He's in the House of Representatives. And we have several other people that are in the midst of many, many important places in government.
Good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to interview my uncle, Joseph E. Kimpson. And for the record, I'm Milton Gary Kimpson, Milton G. Kimpson, and I'm going to talk to Uncle Elvin about his membership in Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Okay, when was the first time that you remember ever noticing the Omega Psi Phi fraternity? Of course, your brother Milton, my dad, was a member of the Omega Psi Phi.
Yeah.
And did you become an Omega sometimes after he did that?
About 2 years after.
About 2 years afterwards.
Yeah.
And of course, your son Maxwell
Yeah.
is an Omega, having pledged at Morehouse.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, can you tell us a little bit what sparked your interest in Omega Psi Phi?
Well, I've always thought that if there's anything a person can do with a good fellowship, that it always works well with when you got good fellowship around. And I guess that's one of the things I always thought of, fellowship with those persons who I knew well or either thought a lot of.
Now you went to Benedict as well?
Benedict, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's good to
BC.
Okay, Elvin, as I understand it, you lived for many years in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Were you involved with the Omega chapter up in Spartanburg?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. We had a very active chapter there.
It's my recollection. Isn't it Epsilon Nu?
That's exactly right.
About how long do you remember being a part of that? And tell us a little bit about what you all would do up there in Spartanburg, if you remember.
Well, we always had something that we thought was beneficial to young men. We always figured that our organization had to be helpful to young men wherever. And if we found that a person wasn't doing anything to help, then we always figured that he was not an Omega man.
And as I recall, you were a teacher up there in Spartanburg.
Right.
Is that right?
Yes, indeed.
Can you tell us what impact Omega Psi Phi has had on your life?
I can do that very easily because it was one of the most powerful things that happened to me. And that's because when I grew up and thought about meeting people and saw the impact that Omega had on a lot of folk, that really made the answer for me quickly. And I still feel that way, that Omega was one of the most powerful influences for me. And like I said, I feel like that even today. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that when you left Spartanburg as part of the Epsilon Nu chapter, you eventually moved to Columbia, and at some point you joined both Daddy and me as a part of Omicron Phi.
You bet.
We had some wonderful times, the three of us there.
Yeah.
Would you talk for a minute about what you would tell young brothers now who are just getting into Omega? What would you tell brothers now about being in Omega Psi Phi, just your message to the brotherhood? What would you tell us?
Well, I tell you what, what influenced me. And that was because as I saw Omega men, they were always helping someone and always feeling that they had strong influence in people's lives. And so I always figured that if you got people like that, then as you grow up, you will really be a real influence to young, especially young men, and to people in general.
So you're essentially saying that's what we as Omega currently need to continue to do, help others.
Amen. Yes, indeed. Without a doubt.
All right, well, we're going to try to continue to do that.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Milton Gary Kimpson. I am so pleased to be with my uncle, Joseph E. Kimpson, and my father, Milton Kimpson. And the three of us are here to talk a little bit about our beloved fraternity, the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Each of them has already given some thoughts about Omega, and I'm going to give you my thoughts, and I hope my uncle and my dad will be able to join in. I suppose I noticed Omega for the first time because, of course, I grew up in a house with an Omega man, and my uncle was an Omega man. So I have grown up knowing a little about the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. I'll never forget growing up, there was always this little escutcheon, a little decal on our garage door. And I would see that every day going out. And I didn't know a whole lot about the fraternity, but I did know that my dad and my uncle went to activities. I went to Wofford College up in Spartanburg, South Carolina, Tau Delta, pledged as a freshman, a second semester freshman, in 1980, went over February 15th, 1980. Now what's interesting, I will never forget calling home and telling my dad that I was pledging Omega Psi Phi. And he never put any pressure on me as to which fraternity to be a part of, but I think he was very pleased that I was trying to pledge Omega. I'll share one more thing. I thought during the line things were getting a little rough, so I said I was going to call my daddy. And all he did was kind of laugh at me and say, just hang in there. And of course I did, and I'm so happy that we did. I suppose what sparked my interest in Omega, of course, again, I grew up with Omega men, so I knew about Omega Psi Phi. But when I got to Wofford College, as you may know, Wofford is a predominantly white school, so there weren't a lot of black people there at all. At Wofford, you were either an athlete or you were a student. And I'll never forget, after my, probably early on in my freshman year, the Omega sponsored a study session down in what we called the fraternity house, what really was a large apartment at the bottom of one of the dorms. And I was impressed that these group of men had enough interest in what we were doing as freshmen to say, if you need some help, please come and talk to us. And of course, at the time at the chapter there were persons who were in science, much as my dad has talked about people in science while he was at Benedict. People in science, people in some of the social studies, the humanities, but people at the Wofford campus who were doing well, who thought it not robbery to talk to a little freshman and say, if you need help, this is how you negotiate this, or if you needed some study aid. And it worked out very well. Again, I pledged as a second semester freshman. There were 5 people on the line. I was number 1. Each of my other 4 line brothers had been at Wofford for some period of time. I think actually all of them were seniors, and one of the brothers stayed a little bit longer to finish his degree. So I was on the line as a freshman with these 4 seniors, not knowing much of anything about college life, but I knew that I wanted to be an Omega, primarily because my dad was an Omega and my uncle was an Omega man, so I knew this was what I needed to do. I will always credit pledging and going over at Omega Psi Phi with any success I had at Wofford College. Wofford College back then, again, there might have only been 100 black men on campus. And if you weren't an athlete, you were just kind of a student. And so until I became a part of the fraternity, I had nothing to belong to. I'd go to my room after class and I'd just be there. I'd go eat, but that was it. But once I became a part in Omega, I had a brotherhood. We supported each other. We looked out for each other. Where there were study problems, we helped each other. Where there were emotional problems, we helped each other. Where somehow we thought we had the prettiest girl and she dumped us, the brothers on campus would help out. I even learned to step. Now, I wasn't very good at it, but we had a good time doing it. Now, neither my dad nor my uncle have talked about the social life. I will credit Omega not only with the basics in getting my academics, but also the social life, balancing it out. Because again, I'm in a predominantly white school. It was rough as a black student. Not only was there discrimination, but there wasn't a whole lot to do because not many of us had any money. It was only until sometimes after I pledged that I had a car. But we'd have parties down in the fraternity house, and we'd have a good time. Now the next day, of course, we'd be studying, but it did provide an outlet for me, and I will always be thankful to Omegapsiphi for my college life. I suppose when I think about Omega, I've talked about how important it was to my eventual college matriculation. I'll share this with you. We had, of course, a very small chapter. When I went over, there were 5 on my line, and there were only 4 brothers there, so there were a grand total of 9 Omegas on the yard. If you also remember, I was a freshman, so I spent 3.5 years as an Omega man at Wofford College. At some point, the brothers who were seniors graduated. So I also spent almost about 2 years as the only Omega on campus. So of course I've been the bossilist, and at the same time I was the vice bossilist. I was the KF, the KRS. I was the entire chapter. My dad, I think, served as keeper of peace, but I did all of that. I did it by myself, trying to continue to survive a fraternity chapter with only one person. At the time, my faculty advisor was Tyrone Gilmore, who later became a grand bossilist. But along with Epsilon Nu and the support we got from Epsilon Nu, Tau Delta chapter actually progressed. At one point, as you might imagine, we had the highest grade point average on campus. Now, we won some award, as I recall, and I didn't quite tell anybody. There were only 2 of us on the chapter, but we did have the highest grade point average at the time. Graduated from Wofford, and one of the crowning achievements, I actually was the National Scholar of the Year back in 1983. Left there, went to Emory University Law School, and while I wasn't part of a chapter while in law school, of course I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, so I'm always have contact with Omega men in Atlanta, and that was very important to me. When I got back to Columbia, with very little gap, I became a member of Omicron Phi, and I've been a part of Omicron Phi since then. Now, when I went into the Army, I served out in Oklahoma, and I was a part of a chapter in Oklahoma. The name will get to me, but I was part of the graduate chapter at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And that camaraderie of military officers was also incredibly important. Did 3 years out in Oklahoma and then came back to Columbia, where again picked up with Omicron Phi. Omega has had a tremendous impact on me in college, greater impact probably on my professional life. I had a good time as a Q at Wofford College, and while it's a small, predominantly white school, we had some great times. And of course we traveled as part of the 6th District. We had friends and our other brothers at John C. Smith and other schools in the area. But the greatest impact, I think, has been after college graduation and the continued networking at Omicron Phi and other graduate chapters. As my dad talked about, Jim Clyburn is in Omicron Phi. Where else could I go as a young man at the age I did and see somebody who was going to be in Congress? Vince Ford, some of the other brothers, and I won't call names because I'm sure I'll forget somebody. But that kind of networking was so important as I was growing in my professional life. So Omegapsiphi has had a tremendous impact on me, not only in college, in my professional life, and my social life. My wife and I continue to go to the Mardi Gras. Although I'm a little older now, our goal is to be like our beloved Brother Reuben. Brother Reuben and his wife, even in their advanced age, would always be at the Mardi Gras. They might not dance anymore, but they were there. My goal and my wife's goal, who's a Delta, is to be at Mardi Gras. We realize there's going to come a time when we aren't going to be able to dance, but as long as we can, we're going to be there. Because Omegapsiphi has had such a great impact on me. When I was initiated in Omega back in 1980, that was toward the tail end of the Carter administration. Ronald Reagan then later became president. And things changed a little. But this dovetails into the very last question as we talk about our brotherhood. Despite the fact that Ronald Reagan came in and may have done some things that were not as consistent with moving black folk forward, Omegapsiphi was nevertheless a refuge. I could get with my brothers who were doing things, who were moving forward, so that if I saw things in the political world that I thought would set us back a little bit, I knew that that refuge there at Omegapsiphi, with talking with brothers who were doing things, who were moving forward, that would continue to give me encouragement that despite who might be in the current political office, that we could still achieve as long as we persevered. As long as we persevered. I have served as the counselor at Omicron Phi for a number of years. Of course, I've current counselor. Prior to that, I was a parliamentarian. My hat goes off to those who aspire for greater offices. I think at my age, I don't know that I'm going to try to become the bosses or the vice bosses. I think it takes younger men who have lots of energy. But it has been my highest honor to continue to serve Omicron Phi as counselor and provide what little legal training and legal knowledge that I have to help. How much has the organization changed from the time of initiation? We're a brotherhood, and I think the strength of our organization is that we look out for each other, we serve one another. That core value has not changed and will never change. We look out for each other, we believe in those 4 cardinal principles, and as long as we do that, we will continue. But I think what has changed for the best in Omegapsiphi is that we have grasped technology, we're moving things forward as we can with Zoom meetings now in this time of COVID. We've got emails where we email things out here and there. We have embraced technology, and we have brothers in the chapter who do things like that to keep us all abreast. Even at my age, they've been able to help me to learn things. I'll never forget when the bosselist told me I needed to be on Group Meet. And I couldn't even figure out what in the world he was talking about, but now I'm on Group Meet. And now I even have a Cash App account. It was on Instagram not too long ago. So the younger brothers in the chapter are helping even me, and that helps me tremendously. I will tell you this, though. I've always been so concerned about our pledge program. I pledged. I spent six weeks online at Wofford College. Now, again, Wofford was a predominantly white school, so it might not have been as rigorous as going to school where my dad and my uncle did at Benedict. But we pledged. I have been worried for years that pledging will go too far. I'll never forget when I was in Oklahoma with the graduate chapter, I attended the Grand Conclave out in Dallas. And as going to the parliamentarian, the counselors meeting, sitting there listening to the number of lawsuits that the fraternity was facing because of excesses with regard to pledging, that scared me. Not scared me personally. I wasn't afraid of my physical safety, but I was afraid of a lawsuit that might bankrupt our beloved fraternity. I hope we are getting those things under control. Omegapsiphi has been such a wonderful opportunity for me, and I want that same opportunity for young men who are coming up now. I have 2 daughters, so I don't have anybody that's going to be an Omega, but hopefully They will marry young men who will be an Omega. My brother Marlon, who is also an Omega, he has a son, and we are certainly hoping that my nephew will one day be an Omega man. I've got to tell you before we get through, probably the proudest moment I've had as an Omega man. First time I can remember standing with my dad in singing the Omega hymn. That just made me burst with pride. Now, neither of us, my dad is a pretty good singer, I'm not, but we can't hold a candle to my uncle who can sing. And during sometimes at Omicron Phi meetings, he would actually lead the hymn. The next time, though, that I must tell you about, during the Centennial Conclave in Washington, D.C., 5 Kimpson Omega men were together. My dad, my uncle, me, my youngest brother Marlon, and my cousin Max. The 5 of us were together, and you could not tell us one thing, that we were just the Kimpson brothers of Omega Psi Phi, hailing from Columbia, South Carolina. And that just was one of the most proudest things that I can remember.
Yes, sir.
My message to the brotherhood of Omega Psi Phi. I have had wonderful experiences being an Omega man. I've met people, I've networked, done all kinds of things. First conclave I attended was in San Francisco. I had never been on an airplane before, but my first airplane trip was to fly to San Francisco. Been to Dallas, been to Washington, all kinds of meetings. I encourage our brothers to participate. Participate in the fraternity, network with your fraternity brothers. Never sit back, don't be shy. Be a part of Omega Psi Phi. Be a part of your communities. My uncle and my dad have talked about service. We are a fraternity that's built on service. Let's hold fast to our cardinal principles. As long as we do that, we will progress into the future. I am so impressed with the young brothers in our chapter now who come up with these creative ways to serve the community. A haunted house, taking young men, young boys who might not be able to afford to go see groundbreaking movies, taking them to see Black Panther, taking them to see The Lion King. Not only does that form an immediate service for those young people, but when they get to college, they will remember having fellowship with Omega Psi Phi and hopefully will become brothers. We are such a vibrant organization. Let's continue to move forward. Let's have fun. But when it's time to be professional, when it's time to serve our communities, let's just continue to do that. Because that's what Omega Psi Phi is all about. And as long as we do that, we will continue into the future being the preeminent fraternity among black men. And quite frankly, from all I've seen elsewhere with the other kind of organizations and fraternities, there is no organization that's better than Omega Psi Phi fraternity. And it's my great pleasure to be a part.
Amen.